Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Lashing Out podcast on the Sports Now Network. My name is Jared Pergar, and I'm joined with Kevin Quigley. Kevin, there was nothing but pure chaos in college football on Saturday afternoon and well into the night and in the wee hours of the morning, and I'm absolutely here for it. It was just pure insanity. Upset after upset, referees helping out Miami, and man, it benefited Penn State, and I think the biggest way possible. Now that the Nittany Lions are the number 4 team in the country, 3 out of the top 4 in the country are top or Big Ten teams. And Ohio State at 2, Oregon at 3, and Penn State at 4. Penn State is off to USC, who lost to Minnesota. And PJ Fleck and the Minnesota Golden Gophers go for the touchdown at the end rather than kicking the field goal, and it was a great call. Then last second interception seals the game. That dropped USC all the way out of the top 25 from number 11. And you've got coming up this week, you've got Oregon and Ohio State going head to head for 2 versus 3. And that's not even getting to the point where Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. Wasn't it just a few weeks ago that Nick Saban said Vanderbilt was the only place you really didn't think or didn't have, it wasn't hard to play at? Well, Kalen DeBoer would probably like to have a word.
Yeah, certainly. And probably Oregon. Oregon's probably going to get their ass kicked against Ohio State coming up. I watched their game on Friday night, and Dylan Gabriel is it's his 6th season starting in college football, and he was still making true freshman mistakes. The announcers were going in on him, and rightfully so. Just the decisions he was making, very late on throws, just missing defenders. And you could have told me that he's probably a true freshman or a sophomore in he started less than 20 games in college football, and here he is in his 6th season starting. So terrible performance from Oregon. They get the win. They've not looked at all dominant. They nearly lost to Idaho. They struggled mightily against Idaho. Barely beat Boise State, another team from Idaho. It's just
Kevin, I'm going to have to interrupt you. You need to put respect on the Boise State man. Boise State, another team from Idaho. Come on, man.
I was just making a parallel because they're both from Idaho, but like Oregon, you're not if the number 3 team in the nation should not be struggling to beat Boise State. Boise State's a great team, but at the time they really hadn't gotten their stride, and maybe that's on the media for not having them ranked high enough because Ashton Gentry is just having an absolute season.
Ashton Gentry is a stud. He's my Heisman guy. He's my dude. He's already over 1,000 yards. I love it. The beloved Broncos did win. They were not upset by Utah State. In fact, they took them to the shed. And I think, speaking of Gentry, he
didn't even play the second half.
Played a half. Right. He's only played a half in almost all of their games, except for I think one.
Yeah, except for the Oregon game.
Right. But it's insane, but continue.
Sorry. You and I were talking earlier this week, like in the preview pod of like, man, this week of college football is going to sting. There's only one ranked matchup. Missouri gets blown out at Texas A&M, which was, I don't know why. I have it against a lot of teams. Missouri's one of those teams that I just have it against for whatever reason. Because whenever they're like remotely good, and Rich probably coming, if you're not a Penn State fan listening to this, it's probably Rich coming from my mouth to say this, but like criminally overrated when they're any sort of good. But I mean, Penn State goes 10 wins nearly every season, whereas Mizzou's twice every 10 years. So good. Missouri lost in the only ranked matchup to, I think, Texas A&M was number 23. This was the first weekend since 2016 where 5 of the top 11 teams lost. Very well should have been 6. Miami gets bailed out by the referees again.
Twice.
Miami fans are pointing out that Cal's running back stepped out on a long touchdown. Okay. Cal shouldn't have blown a 25-point lead. It should have never been in the hands of the referees. Massive ineligible man downfield. They had a lineman. It was whatever in goal from the 5-yard line. Lineman standing in the end zone.
3 of them.
at the time of the touchdown pass. So another bailout there. The targeting.
And the targeting. Oh, my God. The targeting was awful. That is the definition of targeting.
Was it Mendoza as the Cal's quarterback, I think? Try to get that right. But absolutely gets ear holed. I mean, his head tilts in the direction that the hit was coming from. If he had got hit in the shoulder, like what Miami fans said, his head would have buckled against the way that his but I can't expect Miami people to understand physics. They're still stuck in the 80s, so they've probably forgotten that knowledge. Yeah, anytime Alabama loses, it's great. Like you mentioned, the absolute troll job from Vanderbilt's in stadium
at the end of the game. Oh my God, that was incredible.
On the scoreboard, they're playing the Nick Saban clip from the McAfee show saying, the only place that you are never afraid to go play in Vanderbilt in the SEC is Vanderbilt. And then you get double up where Tennessee also loses. That was awesome to see. Woo pig for the Arkansas boys out there. What a game from there. And yeah, for a weekend that did not have any sort of hope and promise, we had an absolute banger in college football, and that's why college football is so great.
It was a perfect pregame for next week. What is supposed to be a huge week, but it changed. It changed the complexity of that week because now, Washington took down Michigan by 10 points, which is great. It's crazy for the Big Ten. The SEC is just self-destructing. Georgia handled Auburn rather nicely. The biggest winner of this all is Texas. They picked a great week to have a bye week. And they're now the number one team in the country ahead of the Big Ten, which is also going to hurt itself here coming up. But now we had talked about Penn State being in a situation, judging on paper, going into LA and the Coliseum, being, a top 10 ranked matchup. Now, with that boat race, or I don't want to say boat race because Minnesota handled them really well, but it was still a close game. Now USC has two losses and is out of the top 25. And we're going to talk a lot about USC here later this week, but it changed the complexity of the week. Now my beloved Boise State Broncos are at Hawaii. Oh, yes, I'm so pumped. I just saw the game time. 11 p.m. on Saturday night. That's going to be a late night. But you've got South Carolina at Alabama. What Alabama team is going to show up? You've got Missouri now as number 21. They're at UMass. At UMass? What? You got the Red River rivalry between Texas and Oklahoma. Cal Pittsburgh or Pitt, number 22 ranked Pitt. Penn State and Pitt are both undefeated. Then you got Mississippi State at Georgia. You've got Florida at Tennessee.
You want another factoid about undefeated? This is something that blew my mind. ESPN threw it on the bottom line yesterday. Penn State is the only FBS team to start every season since 2021 as 5-0.
Mm-hmm.
That boggled my mind because, how is Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, how are they not starting the season undefeated since 2021? Penn State's the only FBS program to do that. Now, the wheels have fallen off later in the season after the 5-0 start. So the other FBS programs do have that over them, but just remarkable consistency coming for the Penn State program.
No, and that's a very good point. And on paper, the best matchup in the SEC is Ole Miss and LSU in Death Valley. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That should be that's a game for top 10. LSU is one of the few undefeated SEC teams. They're 4-1 on the year. But the biggest thing I think this weekend has taught me is that Penn State is doing the right thing. And by doing the right thing, what I mean by that is they're winning. That's all they have to keep doing. Yes, they are 5-0. They have not looked pretty. We're going to talk a little bit about how this game really looked in the second segment. But again, they are winning, and that is what matters the most as chaos engulfs the top 25.
Yeah, another thing that matters the most is paying our bills. So let's go ahead and do that. This episode is brought to you by Good Dog Beverage Company. Good Dog offers a variety of products, including zero carb, zero sugar, vodka cocktails, and bourbon hard seltzers. Also, it's whiskey cocktails that only have 3 grams of carbs and 3 grams of sugar. Through Good Dog's Leverage the Beverage program, they donate a portion of the profits from every case sold and 100% of the merchandise sales profits to provide service dogs for people in need. You can go to gooddogbeverage.com. That's good. DOGG beverage.com to find merchandise and the closest retailer carrying Good Dog beverages to you.
Very good, Kevin. Now, looking at Penn State, they've just kept winning, right? Going back through that, the starting 5-0 for the last 4 years, right? They've lost in that 6th game every year except for last year when they started 6-0. They, of course, played Ohio State in that 7th game in Columbus, which is crazy that they haven't gone 6-0 or whatever. But again, the biggest thing right now is just keep winning. To put a spin on Dory from Finding Nemo's Just Keep Swimming, just keep winning. And we're going to talk about how they beat UCLA when we come back from a quick break on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the second segment of the Lashing Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. He's Kevin. I'm Jared. Kevin, Penn State won 27-11. Those last 8 points came on the second-string defense. Starters gave up 3 points, gave up really a lot of chunk plays on the 2 scoring drive or the 1 scoring drive and the first drive of the game. But Penn State played again another really, really good game. It's not going to be flashy on the scoreboard, but again, as we talked about in the first segment, just keep winning. That is all that matters, is that W goes up in the win column every single week.
Yeah, the first drive is starting to become a trend. The slow starts on offense are again becoming a trend. They are dominant. They scored on 5 out of 6 drives to end the second half and to start or end the first half and start the second half. But the first quarter was abysmal. They were outgained 72-28 in the first quarter. UCLA comes out, smacks them in the mouth. Penn State goes, I think, 3 and out on the first drive, and then UCLA just marches down the field for a good drive. And was the game ever in doubt? No, not at all. But there's a lot of question marks going on. Are they dominant? Sure, but do you want them to win bigger? Of course, right? This was a 27-point game. They should have won by 4 touchdowns. They were up 27-3. So for all intents and purposes, they were up by 4 scores, which is important, or 3 scores if it's 24 points. But nearly a 3-possession win, which is what you needed to do. I think Vegas is having a hard time with the transfer portal, with NIL. I think we are seeing the landscape of college football change. I think the games are more competitive because of the transfer portal. I think you and I could catastrophize that, college football landscape would be massively slanted towards the big guys. But I think we are seeing the effects of the transfer portal and that games are closer. Number 1 teams are losing to Vanderbilt in Vanderbilt. And the field goal post marched 3 miles down to the river through Broadway.
Morgan Wallen, I heard, was going to throw it off a building, but he wasn't available.
Yeah, I think he was booked for some other prior commitments, probably throwing beers and bar stools off balconies. But Penn State got there. They took care of business. They just got to figure out first half. They got to figure out first drive on offense because you can't spot Ohio State 3 drives. Ohio State's coming up in 2 weeks. You're not going to be able to spot USC 2 or 3 drives because Miller Moss can throw the ball. And if the defense is going to look as sluggish as it does when it gets off the bus, you're going to need to clean that up. But dominant win. Scoreboard doesn't reflect it. But I think there are a lot of question marks that better opponents are going to exploit that aren't UCLA.
And that's the difficult thing because the scoreboard does reflect some sort of dominance, but it's not sexy to score 27 points. It's sexy to score 35, 40, 50 points. But there's so much more parity now in college football because of the transfer portal and NIL and every other outside situation. But for Penn State, what matters the most is that they're still winning football games. At the end of the day, they're 5-0, right? And James Franklin talks about that 1-0 mentality, and that coach speak gets old, but as a coach, you have to treat it that way. That's what cost, I think, Alabama against Vanderbilt. They come off this huge win, this emotional win against Georgia, and then come out flat and lay an egg. And Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt just runs all over them. Loved seeing that. It was a great game. Absolutely phenomenally played game. Well coached on both sides. And Bama's they're gonna be okay. But again, that's the beauty of Saturdays. Any given Saturday, some team can win, and it might not be who's expected. So you're seeing more upsets because the playing field is even. Those teams like Vanderbilt that have been together for 2 or 3 years, going against a team that has to deal with the portal and it's not necessarily gelling as a team, they're going to win more games because of that. For Penn State, this is a team that's never truly been hampered or hamstrung by the portal. Everybody that's left the portal has gone really, it's pretty lateral or a step down. You can look at Will Levis going to Kentucky and whatever, and Tommy Stevens to Mississippi State. Those are both lateral. Big Ten, the SEC. But the crazy thing is, the Big Ten's got 4 undefeated teams. 3 of them are in the top 5, and the other is Indiana. Indiana is paying $15 million to Penn State's defensive coordinator to not coach them, and it's worked out so well for the Hoosiers. And I think that's crazy too. Again, it's all about the coaching, and it's all about those sorts of things. It's who's going to be the most prepared coming in there every day. And for James Franklin, Penn State, more often than not, they're probably going to be the most prepared team on the field on most Saturdays. But for them, they're leaving on Thursday. The truck left today, we're recording this on Sunday. The truck left Sunday to go out to LA and the Coliseum. So I mean, it's a wild time when you're traveling 4,000, 5,000 miles to a road conference game. But again, that's college football. You can't change that. You can only control what you can control. And I know that's very much coach speak, but it's the truth.
Yeah. And just some fun little interactive we can do here. How many yards did the defense give up in the third quarter? -9.
Negative. Yeah.
-9.
Negative.
How many yards did the starting defense give up in the second half total? 33. So, and they only gave 154 in the first half. So 187 yards they gave up to UCLA. Now, is UCLA's offense prolific? No, but I think Justin Martin gave the UCLA offense a different look. I'd be curious to see if Ethan Garbers. I'd be curious to see if Garbers keeps his starting job after that. Because Penn State's defense has been absolutely locked down in the second half, but the first half looked good. The only thing I want to see cleaned up is 3rd and short, 4th and short scenarios. Tom Allen has a tendency to go in this really soft zone, and the linebackers lose any sort of consciousness to where the sticks are. There was a 4th and 2 or 4th and 3 down near the goal line, and the defense is sitting 3 yards behind the sticks. Unless the receivers push you beyond the sticks, you should set a barrier at the sticks. I don't care if it's 4th and 1. I just that part of it. I just do not get, because when you go and play Will Howard in 2 weeks, guess what he's going to do? He's going to pick you apart, because Ohio State has 4 5-star receivers playing. They're not the 3, 2, 3, 4 stars that UCLA has. We're talking about the number 1 wide receiver that Ohio State's gotten seemingly every year for the last 6 years. Ohio State's pulled the number 1 wide receiver in the recruiting class. And that's what they put out there. I mean, they pulled Julian Fleming, but yeah.
And Fleming is good. But when you're in the room with those types of receivers, like Brian Hartline is the best receivers coach in the country, hands down. That's not a knock on what Penn State's got and Marcus Higgins. That's just how good Hartline is. He's just pumping out guys left and right. And you do have to worry about that. Obviously Ohio State is a much different beast than Illinois or Bowling Green or UCLA. Right? That's the dragon Penn State needs to slay. But they get a week to prepare for that. They get a week after going to Camp Randall, which is not an easy place to play. After going to the Coliseum, which isn't going to be an easy place to play. So that's all well and good, but the quarterback change there for UCLA and Garber's not being available changed the complexity of that game.
Yeah,
that allowed Penn State, in my opinion, to go without Nick Singleton.
Yes,
who did not play, did not cross. He warmed up, did everything but play. He was in full gear, looked good on the sidelines, had no helmet. That to me proved that they knew they could win that game without him, whether he's banged up, nicked up, whatever it is.
It was
through all that.
It was important to keep him healthy. Like if you're any sort of illness, they knew they could win the game, and they went out and proved it. And yes, it's dominant. Am I nitpicking?
Yeah, right. That's the thing. We're nitpicking every win, but against USC, who are they going to need the most? Nick Singleton, Katron Allen.
For sure.
Quentin Martin, Drew Aller with his legs.
The run blocking did not look fantastic. It never felt like Katron Allen had the chance to break one loose. But again, nitpicking. I mean, they're 5-0. Like, how many negative things can we talk about? And we can only talk about so many positive things. So,
right.
Yeah, they took care of business. Who cares what Vegas says? Because
right,
like we discussed earlier, winning is so much more important this year, and it's showing. I really don't think that there's going to be an undefeated team left at the end of the year. Texas is probably going to lose one. Ohio State's going to lose one. Oregon's probably losing on Saturday night. Penn State's inevitably going to drop one. Like, I think
Penn State's entering a gauntlet.
Yeah,
they're entering their version of the gauntlet that's going to make or break their season. They've got at USC. And we're like I said, we're going to talk a lot about USC obviously later, but I want to touch on this today. What type of USC are you going to get? Right? They have 2 losses. They're out of the top 25. Are they going to be disinterested, or are they going to come out fired up? That's going to be the key on Saturday. Which USC team is it going to be? A pissed off USC team, or is it just going to be like type deal? Like rush defense wise. I watched Minnesota run all over them. I've watched Michigan run all over them. Penn State's got one of the most potent rushing attacks in college football. So, I mean, that's a great situation for them. But you've got USC. Then you're on the road to Camp Randall in Wisconsin, who's playing some really tough football. And obviously, again, Camp Randall is not an easy place to play. And that's a problem. And so for them, you just got to keep doing what you're doing. They're 3-2, 1-1 in the Big Ten. They've got Rutgers this week. Wisconsin does at Rutgers, but I mean they're 2 wins. Western Michigan, or 3 wins, I guess. Western Michigan, South Dakota, and then Purdue. They lost to USC by 17. They got boat raced by Alabama. So again, got to go in and just handle business. Luke Fickell's a very good coach out there. But first is USC. You got to get through USC. Then you can think about Wisconsin. And then you can think of the bye week in Ohio State. And Penn State's not home until November 2nd against the Buckeyes. That game has every makings of what could be depending on how this goes over the next 3 weeks, a top 4 matchup at Beaver Stadium.
And probably top 3 because Oregon's going to fall out.
Right. Yeah. And that's the crazy thing. It could very easily be for the Big Ten, for who's going to be a team in the Big Ten championship. But again, they're 5-0. They're 1 win away from being bowl eligible. But obviously, bowl eligibility is very low in the totem pole compared to their aspirations. The goal that's the first goal to reach, right? That's six wins, become bowl eligible. That's the first goal. Then it's all right, win the Big Ten, and they have the potential to do that. They've just got to keep winning.
Yeah, they certainly do, and I think it's important to note they do have a bye week between the road trip to USC and the road trip to Wisconsin. So
Right,
props to
and
the
that's
equipment.
huge.
Props to the equipment team for getting the truck ready to go, turned around, all the helmets buffed, cleaned, restriped between the end of the game yesterday and by the time the truck departed this morning. So props to the equipment staff. They don't get enough love.
No, and the reason I know that is I spent halftime in the radio booth for Penn State, and rather than having the terrible hot dogs that they have in the Beaver Stadium press box, but my producer, my boss for Friday nights for the radio is producer and does some board operations for the radio broadcast for the Penn State radio network. And I was like, oh, he's like, I have to have all this stuff back for Sunday. It's coming there. It's riding on the truck out to USC and leaving on Sunday. And I thought that was that's insane, but it makes sense. And that's the other thing I want to touch on before we go to the third segment. We mentioned preparation, right? On our podcast about when UCLA was going to get there. UCLA got there 4:00 on Friday afternoon. They played less than 24 hours later. Penn State's going out an extra day early. That's kind of the way James Franklin handles it, right? But again, that's kind of one of those situations where see what happens. But for them, they're going to be prepared. I do think that they looked past UCLA this week a little bit, given the quarterback issues with them. But again, all they did was win, and that's all that matters in the grand scheme of things.
Yep. Want to know. Who cares if Vegas says the only thing that we care about is the AP poll and eventually the ESPN poll?
Exactly. For now, we are going to move to the third and final segment when we come back from this break on the Nittany Sports Now network.
The segment for the
Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Lashing Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now network. I'm Jared. He's Kevin. Kevin, the Penn State offense left a little bit to be desired, in my opinion, but it was great to see Liam Clifford go over the century mark. Tyler Warren still continues to be a stud, and it's just one of those deals where on any given day in this offense, good things can happen to different players. And you look at how Kansas is doing and how different they look without Andy Kotelnicki, and you're like, okay, well, things could always be much, much worse.
Yeah, and shout out to Liam Clifford, 3 receptions for 107 yards, including that 57-yard bomb. Other drives, 24 and 26 yards, all on third down and key situations. Really kept those scoring drives held together. So shout out to the Little Red Dog doing every bit of damage on third down and just being a third down menace. Kind of good to see that Drew trusts him on third downs because he does have Trey. Trey's really 3 for 46 yesterday. Yeah, I just want to think, like, is the offensive playbook too big? Does Andy Kotelnicki have too many things to look at, too many things to prepare for? Does the offense just have too many things in their mind to start the game? Like, is it sluggish because they have 100 plays in their minds? Or is it that Andy Kotelnicki has 100 plays to call from?
I think overall, it's just a lack of execution. I don't think that it's too complicated or too tricky. That was Mike Yursich. That was too many players thinking. But one of the biggest things, you look at last year and everything that kind of went on, it's just one of those situations where they were thinking too much. They were not being active. They were not being able to just go play. This year, the offense is much better aligned to let players play, but it's a tackle here. It's getting arm tackled there. It's a ball thrown behind a receiver or a miscommunication. I don't think that it's overly complicated. I don't think that they're thinking too much. I just think that it's a failure to execute. And I think it's the same thing defensively because those third downs and fourth and shorts that you mentioned, those guys are rushing in the middle of the field's open. So they're just missing by a little bit, and it's costing. I think it's more of an execution issue rather than an offensive issue. Do I think that there's too much window dressing? Yeah, probably.
I think
But
there's too many
Greg
personnel.
Ione literally put a dude into next week
That was awesome.
from the slot receiver position. So I mean, there's obviously good, bad, and different with a lot of the situation. They didn't necessarily rely on the Pabula package too much on Saturday, which I thought was a blessing. I think again that should be shot to the moon. But again, they're doing what they need to do. It's just I think to start, they're amped up and they just don't execute, and that's just one of those situations that's not always easy.
I'm 50-50 on the Pavola package. I think it offers some good value there for the offense. I just don't like it on 3rd and 5. It puts the offense in too much of a one-dimensional, because Bo Pabula has thrown one time out of 75 snaps, let's call it. In the Pabula package, like the threat to pass has not been defined enough that the defense has to respect it. So on 3rd and 5, that's kind of a down and distance where running it is risky anyways, because you can't guarantee 5 yards. You can guarantee 2 or 3, but 5 is kind of getting to that fringe point where like the defense is going to sell it to stop the run and you are going to get snubbed. And that happened. That ended up killing a drive for Penn State there. One thing that they have done well, and I got to give Kotelnicki props to this, and I got to give Drew Aller props for this. Drew Aller worked incredibly hard in the in the off season to get more athletic, slim down, work on his running ability, and I think we're seeing the impacts of that. The Julian Fleming pass that almost scored, like really rooting for Julian Fleming to get the touchdown there, but fake the outside zone to Katron Allen left. Drew rolls over to his right, and he put the linebacker in conflict. The linebacker had to play both the run for Drew Aller and the pass, and that allowed the throwing window to stay open for Julian Fleming. And that opened up that opportunity for Julian Fleming to almost score. If Drew doesn't put in all of that work in the offseason, if Kotelnicki maybe doesn't instill that confidence in him or light that fire under him to get more athletic, to be more of a run threat, that play doesn't happen because that linebacker just attacks downhill to him. That linebacker just, he was like, I got to play the run in case he scrambles, got to play the pass, like just pure conflict from the linebacker. And that was just one play that really stuck out to me. So credit to Andy and credit to Drew for just the amount of work he put in the offseason to become that run threat.
Yeah, it's a confident Drew Aller, and I think that's the great thing. For me, this offense, I think, still is running at some of its basic stuff. There's so many different things that they can really work into it that they put on film in those first 5 games. They either might not have gotten back to, or they just have more options from it. Obviously, Drew Aller splitting out wide doesn't quite do a lot other than make sure a cornerback is out of the box. But, who knows what they can run out of that. But I don't like the Pabula stuff. The Warren Cat is okay to me. It makes sense at times. I would love to see them run a power I with Allen and Singleton, or even Tyler Warren there at the H-back would be great. Just as him as a lead blocker is nasty. But there's so much more that we haven't seen. And this is where that's going to start. And then obviously the rest of the season, get to that 6th win, get to that full eligibility, and then realize that all of your goals are still left right in front of you. And knowing that what's going on across the country is that teams aren't lucky enough to win every week. And that was proven this weekend when most of the top 10 fell. And it's really crazy to say that because they were all to unranked teams that weren't expected, obviously, as favorites to do that.
No. And another team that did get a win was Nebraska. We never set a wager, so we'll just set it as bragging rights for this round. I win this round. but props to the Huskers. Matt Rule's doing a great job there as well. Big matchup coming up for Nebraska against Indiana. Raiola looked pedestrian in most of that game for Rutgers. Kind of his first real big Big Ten test for Raiola. So we'll see what they do going forward. But yeah, lots of good things. I think the offense has a lot more that it can build on. A lot of things that it's shown that just a lot of the plays that they've done, it just feels like are setting up 2, 3, 4 more options from that same play. You're right. It's down to execution. Defense is down to execution. DeJuan Lane, I wanted to see a lot from him this week, and I think he was Penn State's worst graded defender according to PFF. He was the one who missed the assignment on the long wheel route. Running back assignment is day one stuff. So
now, of course, there was a holding penalty on that play.
Yeah. No, the long wheel route.
Yes.
Was there a holding call on that one? I thought that one went for like 56 yards.
Yes, the inside receiver just ran downfield, did not run a route. He just blocked and held.
Gotcha. So it was a missed holding call.
Yes. Yeah, there are a lot of bad the officials. And I think that's the other thing, too. Penn State is winning by enough that the officials aren't impacting the game. It was bad on both sides. And it has been historically bad throughout the year. Now, it's not at the level where the ACC is just manufacturing Miami wins. And I want to touch on that really before we go. That's 2 weeks in a row. If it happened once a week, one in 1 week, last week, whatever, that was a tough play. Obviously, you want to see Virginia Tech win, and at least I do, because I think that again, chaos. But and Cal obviously blows a 25-point lead or whatever, not great. But the missed targeting or the overturned targeting, I guess I should say, and then the ineligibles downfield, it so much seems like they want Miami to be that team. And to me, when it looks like that, that's not good. It can't look like that. And those are 2 big plays. I fell asleep at the end of the third quarter. I just couldn't handle ACC After Dark. But when it looks like that, it's never a good thing.
Yeah, the ACC is striving to stay relevant. They do not want to be that number 5 ranked Power 4 conference champion. They don't want to be that. So they want to make sure that they get.
But Pitt is 5-0. Pitt's 5-0. Pitt is it.
Is Pitt legit though?
I have no idea. I have no idea who is legit and who's not legit. And that's the beauty of college football this year. This is anybody's game. Right now, I think I saw a projection. Penn State is slated to host Alabama. Imagine a Southeast Conference team coming to Beaver Stadium in December.
The second week of
the
December.
Electricity in the atmosphere. And them playing above the Mason-Dixon line would just be absolutely insanity. And I want that, as great as it would be to win the Big Ten, right, and get that bye and go straight into the New Year's Six or whatever, to get that at Beaver Stadium would be electric.
Yeah, they wouldn't have that road home field advantage like they had at Vanderbilt this week. That's for sure. I'm not sure there's a large Alabama following above,
that was the
let's say, Tennessee.
Field storm I've ever seen.
There was some logistics there. There was only one stairwell out of the student section. It was like 15 feet up. The kids were trying to jump.
The only ones that were there for Vanderbilt, which was even better.
They were trying to jump the railing, but then you jump the railing onto the steps, and you were jumping on top of people. So they are far smarter than you and I, those Vanderbilt students. So I'll give them credit that they even attempted the field storming there. So
the beauty is for Penn State, as we've said the entire podcast, they have kept winning. That's all they need to do. Next up is USC, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them, or a lot more about them, on our next podcast later this week. For Kevin Quigley, this has been Jared Prugar on the Nittany Sports Now Network. We thank you, as always, for listening, and we'll catch you again later this week.